Hey, what's up? Welcome back to my channel. Today I want to do a little bit of story time, not giving you a lesson about GPT or philosophical message. I just really want to talk about my experience recently that happened about a week and a half ago at this point. So, from the end of 2019 till now, I've been traveling back and forth, like splitting my time and my work and my family life between the United States, which is where I'm from, and the beautiful country of South Africa, which is where I'm currently at right now. And the way it works is I operate on a tourist visa. I would come to the country and land and get stamped at the airport for 90 days. And I generally wouldn't stay 90 days. I'd have to return back to the US for work quite often, sometimes 2 to 3 times a month. But my family is here, and so I've been spending much more time here now as opposed to, taking a 3 times a month trip. So because of that, I've been participating in other ways to utilize my visas. Previously, you extend your visa and submit an application to the Department of Home Affairs, which manages their immigration here. You submit an application to extend your visa, and it is comprised of like an income statement, shows how much money you make. You can prove to say you're just a tourist in the country, you're not here to work or mooch off the South African government. Nothing like that. You have to show that you have a place to stay. Had a short-term lease here of an apartment that I'm in right now. So I've been able to use that as my proof of places to stay and my income, work stubs and things like that. And I've done that twice before, and both times I've gotten my visa extended. But, the second time it became a much more longer wait than the first time as the economy here in South Africa is shifting. But eventually I would get the visa extension. So fast forward to September 2023. I had applied to renew my visa about a week and a half before it expired. And you're able to do that, not that saying you're going to get the visa renewal in 4 days. That's not going to happen. It's going to take at least a month at least. But as long as you file your application within the deadline of your visa expiring, you're allowed to stay in the country until you get a reply or a decision about whether your visa will be extended or not. So that's how it works here, or used to work for me and other tourists on small term visas for quite some time. So I tried to leave to go to work while the visa application was still pending. Again, remember, before I was able to do this, I have proof in my passport, stamps, customs saw my receipt that you pay to extend your visa. This time, they said I overstayed my visa, and I was essentially banned for 5 years from entering the country. 5 years. Meanwhile, as I mentioned, my family's here. So even though I do go back and forth between the United States, this has been my primary home. And it was frightening to go through that experience because it wasn't even that they were like trying to hear me out. I was like, look, here's my receipt from VFS. I paid money to the government to extend my visa. They took me in the back office and were completely not very nice to me. Not very nice at all, but that's cool. That's cool. I forgive them. And just told me that, you know what, you people weren't only people who had their visas a pending application before March 31st were able to extend their visa. You are not those people. Therefore, you are declared undesirable and you're effectively banned 5 years till 2028 from coming back ever to the Republic of South Africa. Wild, right? So after that happened, I was kind of contesting it at the I was like, no, this doesn't make sense. Like, why would VFS take my money? VFS is the company that Home Affairs has hired to process extend visa applications and other forms of immigration services that the government provides. They were like, well, we don't know. We weren't at the visa place, kind of things like that. They took my passport without my permission and stamped it and said, get out of the country and don't come back. But I had a returning flight back that Friday because it was just going for work. I was going to the US for work to pitch at a conference, and I was coming literally right back within 4 days. Back to South Africa. And it didn't make sense to me. So I was kind of like, no, I know this is wrong. So I, immediately started researching legal support while I was on the flight to America and connected with some lawyers. And then on my return back to South Africa, I tried to enter the country and was told again that the receipt doesn't matter. I overstayed my visa and therefore I cannot be allowed to enter the country. I kept telling them, I was like, no, I've worked with an immigration lawyer. So they're like, basically, no, you're not being allowed into this country. And not only that, again, you can't come back for 5 years. We're going to take you to a room where you can stay. I've never been detained in a foreign country. and was sent upstairs to this detention center where they took all of my electronics immediately. Well, they let me make a phone call and then locked me in a room with 3 other men, I think, at the beginning. Maybe 2 other men. I think it's 3 of us. A dirty room. I'll put a picture here because I snuck my phone in at the end and took a picture. Just for proof of what it was like, I was detained. And they weren't very clear about the process of what I was supposed to do. So I had flown from America on KLM, and then KLM, when I got there, they were so, just the policies and the processes were so disorienting. And I think even the people, South Africans going through the process, weren't very knowledgeable about what they were doing, to be honest. KLM was like, I was like, well, I can't buy a ticket because my luggage is there. Can I get my luggage? No, you can't get your luggage. So I was like, well, how am I supposed to buy a ticket away from the country? They're like, well, we'll come talk to you, whatever. It took them like 3 days to actually come talk to me. By that third day, I had hired a lawyer, a South African lawyer, and I was like, I know I should be allowed entry into the country. I did nothing wrong. This is a mistake. Finally, the fourth day, that by that time I had a lawyer who had already printed up an affidavit for me and went over the laws and emailed Border Immigration Authority, who's appointed by the Department of Home Affairs to manage immigration at the airport, was like, hey, this happened. Why did this happen with this person who legally applied to extend their visa and should not be detained or banned or deemed undesirable because they didn't overstay their visa? They were waiting for their visa application to finish to be processed, which is like the legal process. And they replied with, you know what, after March 31st, specifically there was a directive happening in South Africa where after March 31st, anybody who didn't apply for a visa extension before March 31st would be ruled undesirable because South Africa was so backlogged with visas that they couldn't keep up. They had to issue a directive to kind of pause accepting applications for renewals, which is fine. However, they did not communicate this bit of information to the company that they hired to process visas. So there was a lapse in communication, a very important lapse. And so the Border Immigration Authority guy mentioned this in the emails you can see here. Again, and he was like, yeah, you're right, our bad. the director of Home Affairs should figure out a solution to this problem. And for people like Courtney Ryan Ziegler, they're like pretty much fucked because my lawyer was on it, man. He was like, exactly. So this was an error, and you admitted an error by the South African government, because had I had known, I would have left the country and not given them my money to apply for a visa extension, right, at all. Because it's not cheap, actually. It's also almost like 400 USD to do it with a concierge service so that you get it right and don't get rejected by Home Affairs, because things move slow here. So, yeah, once the South African government admitted that there was no solution to dealing with people whose visas were backlogged and that their employees were not knowledgeable about what to do either, that's when my lawyer was like, thanks for saying that proof. Great. Now I'm requesting that he be removed from detention and allowed entry into the country and removed from the undesirable list. The border immigration dude who replied and was like, it was our bad. The government told him to release me, and he didn't capitulate for some reason. He didn't follow through, and he was being very arrogant. So we dealt with him for like 2 days. That's when my lawyer was like, okay, we have to go through the High Court now. The High Court is a court in South Africa that looks over cases that, kind of supersede legislators, right? So we had to go above the border immigration guy because he admitted that they were wrong and refused to do anything while I was languishing in detention, kind of going crazy. Long story short, I spent another 3 days in detention, and by that time we had gone to the High Court and won our case, won my lawsuit against the Department of Home Affairs and South African government. It was expensive. Luckily, I had the cash to do it, to get a lawyer, because it was wild to be banned. But at the same time, I knew what was going on. I knew that they were wrong, and because I had followed the rules and the laws, they threw everything at me to try to threaten me, come bring the police to the detention center, kind of threatened me to get on the plane. That KLM eventually bought a ticket the 5th day, and I was like, I'm not getting on the plane because my case is already going to the High Court and been accepted by a judge at the High Court. Therefore, I have evidence that proves that this is all unjust detention and unjustly mistreatment of stopping me from entering the Republic of South Africa. Whole time I was freaking out. At the end, won the case thanks to the South African government actually proving that they made a mistake, and I've still not gotten any word on that visa application renewal that's submitted over 2 months ago at this point. I have a brand new visa that I fought for and I stood up for. I'm going to make a follow-up video about the things that I saw. But yeah, so my advice to foreigners, if you are here on a tourist visa and you spend a lot of time and now leave the country and get a new visa and come back, leave and come back. It costs for me about the same price to do either or, and it's nice to take an extra trip, go to some other African country, leave and come back. Don't take the risk of doing things bureaucratically with the government right now, because there's a lot of work that needs to be done. And actually, hopefully, my case will help others and create some kind of precedent that help foreigners, because even folks like me get caught up in the lack of proper procedures as a foreigner here in South Africa. But that's my story of how I got banned and unbanned within a week in South Africa.